thought it would be good today to talk about is Hawaii a remote worker paradise? The remote worker thing is a big thing. It's been happening kind of since COVID sort of got started. And I kind of wanted to have a discussion between us. I threw a couple of bullet points here, but we can kind of take this conversation anywhere that you want to go. There's a whole class of people, right? These remote workers, and they come from a variety of walks of life. Some of them are permanently, some people have said, hey, I am now a permanent remote worker. I will essentially never go back into the office again. I could kind of live wherever I want. That's kind of one category. The other ones are, well, we're remote workers. We may have to come into the office, once a quarter, once a month or so. And it's, it's, for the cost of a flight, it's worth it. I'd rather live in Hawaii. So there's a couple of, and there's other categories as well, I'm sure. But I guess the question I wanted to have to go around the table here is, what should remote, there's a lot of things, we all take for granted. And I think the Texas, the Texas tragedy of the storms really kind of gave us an idea about that. As people that live in a modern society, we kind of expect every time that you turn the light switch that the lights are going to go on. We expect that, when you turn on the stove, if you've got gas, the flame's going to pop, right? Or you're going to be able to heat up your food. We expect these things to be working. We expect internet to always be working. There's a lot of things that we come to expect in our society. We expect the sewers are going to be working. We expect that roads are there. There's an near infinite amount of things that we expect to be there. And we don't think about making sure that they're there when we're looking at moving somewhere or buying somewhere, etc. So I kind of wanted to kind of get a sense from you folks of, from your knowledge and from people that you've sold homes to for remote workers, what are some things that we tend to take for granted, especially remote workers tend to take for granted, that they should be considering before they buy a house in Hawaii? What are the pitfalls? A pitfall that pops in my head is, Dylan, you live on the Big Island, and we had a great episode about kokies, the koki frogs at our last exciting episode. And for example, if you've got a remote worker and you're doing phone calls at night in Hilo and you got koki frogs, you're not going to like that. That's not going to work out for your remote workers. That's just an example. So with that as the setup, let's talk about remote workers. Dylan, what advice, what pitfalls, what things should remote workers that are considering the Big Island, what should they be thinking about?
Well, definitely one aspect is time zone. So, if you're not an early riser and you're working on mainland time, that could be something that could be a good thing or could be a bad thing. I've had several clients buy over the last few months that are remote workers that actually really like the fact that they can get up at 3 a.m. and really be done working by lunchtime, and then have the rest of the day to go to the beach and enjoy Hawaii and just kind of reset your clock, where you just got to go to bed a little bit earlier because your day starts a little bit earlier. But that's definitely an advantage, where your work day isn't necessarily in the core hours of the day. You can get that work day done earlier in the morning and then enjoy the rest of the day. So that's one thing, is just that your time zone. But other than that, I mean, we have very good, reliable, I think we've talked about it in the past, internet pretty much everywhere. I mean, unless you live very remotely and really off the grid, our internet availability is very high speed, and there should be no issues there. And of everyone that I've personally sold a property to that is a remote worker, I mean, I don't get any negative feedback. I mean, most of them are making it work, and they're really enjoying it, and they're really happy, especially in situations like now in the mainland, where they're here enjoying the weather and not having to worry about outages due to snow, right? I mean, that's something, we have weather issues here once in a while. I mean, there's always potential for hurricanes. It doesn't happen very often, but you're guaranteed going to get winter storms in the Northwest, right, or Northeast almost every year. So there's sometimes we're more reliable here than you would be somewhere else in terms of internet availability.
So what I hear you saying, Dylan, is unless you're going to go to some remote location, if you're going to go into, normally sort of, if you're going to go into kind of normally populated areas, shouldn't be a problem. Internet is internet's there. Yeah. Well, let's talk about power later, because I got UPS units, battery backup units on every electronic device in my house, but we'll talk about that later. Heidi, what kind of things should remote workers that are coming to Maui be looking for? Is there anything specific about Maui that you need to kind of be aware of, look out for, account for, etc.?
I mean, not in particular. Most of the people that I know that are clients and friends that are remote workers are just really liking the work-life balance of getting the workday done early in the morning and then going out and surfing or spending time with kids and family in the afternoon. So as long as you like waking up early, that tends to work out really well. I mean, we're 5 hours behind New York, 2 hours behind LA right now, 4 hours behind Chicago. Another advantage too is being in Hawaii, you're less likely to get those really late night work calls if you're here because everybody else is, hopefully sleeping by the time your day is done. So yeah, I would say the one thing to think about is it can be a little isolating being a remote worker wherever you are. So, I mean, you do want to make a point to get to know your neighbors and get involved some way in the community. And that's going to help it really feel like a home if you're moving here. I mean, we have a great culture, great community. So I would encourage people not to, totally isolate themselves from all that.
That's a good set of advice. Let's move on to Scott. Scott, what are your tips and insights for remote workers looking at Oahu?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the best places on the planet to do it from. I mean, the work, like Heidi said, the work-life balance is amazing. And because our temperatures so consistent all year round, I mean, I jokingly will take a screenshot of the weather for the week and send it to people, and it varies by 1 degree per day throughout the entire week. So we're between the 70s and the upper 80s throughout the year. So we don't have the ice storms, things such as that cause power outages or loss of internet. In doing so, if you do lose the internet, you go surfing for a little bit to get that work-life balance and blow off some steam that something went wrong. It's a great place to live. I would probably say a couple of the things to think about, like Dylan mentioned, is the time zone change. And then if you do have to commute, I feel like Oahu is the perfect place because you got the schools, you got a big city, the best schools, medical help, or the medical centers here are the best. You have a regular city. So if you do have kids and things and you have activities, this is a great place for it. You get the significant cultural and restaurant diversity and activities over here on Oahu. And your flights out of here are going to be more direct to more places. That is the one thing to consider, though, if you're coming from New York and you do have to commute periodically back and forth there, how is that? Do you really want to do that? How are you going to handle it? Otherwise, I think it's a perfect place to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love all your perspective on this. I'm going to add mine from a more technical point of view. I've been essentially a remote worker for the past 10 years. We built a home office a while ago, and we were essentially working remotely for just about all of our clients. So a couple of things that I would add on that is that the time zone thing is really awesome. I've got a good friend who was one of the first members of the Ohana before I formalized the Ohana, and we become good friends. We surf together at Makapu every so often, and he has a practice where his job has been was to make phone calls at dinner time. So his rhythm was making East Coast dinner time phone calls to reach out to his clients. So dinner time figures 6 o'clock Eastern. So Heidi, to your point, Eastern is either 5 or 6 hours behind Hawaii. So now instead of him having to make calls at dinner time, his dinner time, 6 or 7 p.m., he makes calls at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or at noon, and absolutely loves it. So he, drops off his kids, does his calls, which is dinner time on the mainland. And then, by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he's completely done and completely free. So it's totally awesome. On the technical side, I would say this. I would say that I don't know about you guys on the Big Island in Maui, but here, the power, I would call that not. The reliability is not stellar. So if there's winds, see, they're all smiling because they know what I'm talking about here. Winds come, boom, power goes out. There was an accident. Somebody hit an electrical pole a couple weeks ago, right, Scott? Remember that? And power was off for the whole day for 10,000 customers. So the power here is not terribly reliable. I mean, it's good, but it's not completely reliable. So as a result, as I mentioned this, I touched on this earlier, I've got battery backup units for every single electronic device in my house, my TV, my Xbox, my, the audio system, of course, the computers, if it's electronic, it's got a battery backup. And there are a lot of times when it'll blip, the power is going to blip and it trips, you hear all the battery backups go beep, 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 and you continue just fine. So that'd be one thing I would consider. From a remote worker standpoint, I would also consider your environment. I did make the it's not a joke, the reality about the coqui frogs. For example, coqui frogs on the Big Island, right? If you're going to be making calls late at night, you're going to have late night calls with whoever, and you got coqui frogs, it's going to screw up the microphone.
Or in my house chickens, right? You hear the chickens crowing in the background at my house.
But I got to tell you, there's something totally cool about having roosters crowing while you're on a call, right? Because that's like something that most people don't have that experience whatsoever. But yeah, very well said. If you got roosters crowing in the morning because you're going to make morning calls. I actually I had a bunch of my clients will tell me, oh, Peter, we love talking to you because whenever you're on the call with us, we hear the birds outside. I'm like, yeah, that's right, man. You hear the birds. But there are those environmental issues. So you do need to be aware of that. You need to kind of be aware of your environmental place because Hawaii is awesome. You don't want to have to seal up the room to get onto a call. You're maybe used to sealing up the room on the mainland because it's always too hot or too cold, but here it's always perfect. We want to have like right now, my windows are open. So those environmental issues would be something. And then finally, on the internet is pretty ubiquitous, but if you have certain specific internet needs, if you need to go beyond just kind of the typical bandwidth like a Zoom call, if you need to have high download speeds or high upload speeds because you're doing some additional work, and if you do that, you're kind of technical anyway. But you would want to find out from the internet provider. We have two main internet providers here across the state. Spectrum does it through cable service, and then we have the phone company Hawaiian Telecom, who does it through let's say the traditional phone network. Those two offer various internet services. Those are the two main providers. You want to find out what's available. The speed and performance does change on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. There's a lot of factors that will affect it. So you want to be aware of that if that becomes an issue.